Today we are looking at comparing and ordering integers. So when we are comparing rational numbers, and today specifically we're focusing on integers, we write what we call inequalities. So an inequality is going to use one of these three symbols right now. So this symbol right here means less than. This symbol means greater than. And this symbol means equal to. So you might have used this in the past where you just say, oh, the alligator is eating the bigger number, so the mouth is open and eating the bigger number. But now we're really going to talk about it using the proper language when you're reading left to right. So the small number is on the left. This number is smaller than this number, or this number is greater than that number. So if I think about it, it kind of comes to a point and it's a smaller gap right there, so that's the smaller number, and then you have a bigger gap here which should be next to the bigger number. Okay? When we are thinking about comparing numbers, you can always use this number line to kind of help you. Okay, remember that when you go to the left, your numbers get smaller. When you move to the right, your numbers get bigger. And a bigger negative is actually a smaller number. So numbers that are further to the right are greater than the numbers that are further to the left, and numbers that are further to the left are less than the numbers that are further to the right. Couple other helpful hints. Positive numbers are always, always, always greater than negative numbers, right? Thinking of temperature, I'd rather it be in the positives than in the negatives. Negative numbers are always less than, so the opposite. Negative numbers are always less than positive numbers, so negative temperatures are always colder than the positive temperatures. And then negative numbers are always less than 0. 0 is kind of your middle ground there. And then again, remember, negatives are opposites, so a bigger negative is actually a smaller number. So let's look at some problems here. Compare each number. Complete the inequalities by filling in each circle with less than, greater than, or equal to signs to make it true. So first off, if I'm looking at 5 and negative 7, I have a positive number and I have a negative number. So right away, I know that a positive number is going to be greater than a negative number. 5 is greater than negative 7. Over here, we've got negative 1 and negative 4. So I could use the number line and look and say, okay, I've got negative 1 and negative 4. Negative 1 is further to the right, which means negative 1 is greater than. And I can remember, I think about it this way. 1 would normally be smaller than 4 if we were talking about positives, but negatives work in the opposite way. So negative 1 is actually greater than negative 4. All right, number 3, negative 26 and negative 23. So I think about them as positives first. I kind of ignore the negative signs. If this was positive 26 and positive 23, 26 would be greater than 23. But it's a negative, so it's the opposite. A bigger negative is a smaller number, so negative 26 is smaller than or less than negative 23. Number 4. We've got the absolute value. Remember, these signs on the side mean absolute value. The absolute value of negative 31. So the distance 31 is away from 0 is positive 31. So I'm going to rewrite. I'm going to prove my answers by rewriting. We're comparing 31 and 30. Well, 31 is greater than 30. So the absolute value of negative 31 is greater than the absolute value of 30. 15, we've got negative, or 5, we've got negative 15 and negative 20. So again, I'm going to think about them as positives first. If this was 15 and 20, 15 is less than 20, but it's a negative, it works in the opposite way. Negative 15 would be greater than negative 20. Okay? A smaller negative is actually a bigger number. A bigger negative is actually a smaller number. And then number 6, again, comparing with absolute value. The absolute value of negative 14 is 14. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. 14 is greater than 12. Now let's practice ordering these from least to greatest. Okay. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my negative values. because I know no matter what, all of my negatives should be the smallest, and they are less than all of my positives. Then I'm going to highlight my positives. I'm not highlighting 0 because that's kind of its own special case. So let's first look at the negatives, and I'm going to cross them off as I list them. So we've got negative 12, negative 7, negative 22, and negative 51. We're looking for our smallest number. So remember, our biggest negative is our smallest number. So the biggest negative out here is negative 51. So that's going to be our smallest. Now I'm looking at negative 12, negative 7, negative 22. I'm looking for our next biggest negative because that's our next smallest number. Negative 22 is the next biggest negative. Now I've got negative 12, negative 7. The next biggest negative is negative 12 because that's our smaller number. And then negative 7 is the only other negative we have left. Now before I move on to the positives, 0 is kind of our middle number there. So 0 goes in the middle of our negatives and positives. Now we're moving on to our positives. 14, 8, and 3. The smallest number is 3, then 8, then 14. Okay? Go ahead and try this next one on your own and get your answer checked.